Coming up this week on Success Won't Come Calling.
There's this pack of wolves and we can hear them howling and they're always on our tail. But anyway, fast forward 6 months and the footage that Kyle filmed, that's now been sent to my team in Beijing. And one of the girls there calls me and she said they're saying that down that valley where you're about to go, only yesterday a local lady was killed by a pack of wolves. But we didn't know what they were saying, so we were just like, bye-bye, thank you. And we carried on walking.
Hello friends, Simon Gibson here, podcasted SWCC. Thanks for coming, good to see you here. If you wouldn't mind, if you're watching on YouTube, click subscribe and it will make sure that you never miss an episode and that you're informed as soon as each one drops. You've just heard a few words from my guest this week. I'm very excited about talking to him. It's Mr. Ash Dykes. How are you, sir?
Good, mate. How are you?
Very, very good. I really appreciate you doing this, Ash.
No problem at all. Good to be here.
I first encountered your story when I saw the documentary Walking the Yangtze on National Geographic. We're going to work through the phenomenal expeditions you've undertook as an adventurer and as an extreme athlete.
Yeah, man.
I just wanted to ask you one question, though. During those expeditions, you've had more than your fair share of brushes with death.
Too many. Too many for my age.
These include bears, malaria, sandstorms, wolves, spiders. And each time you go on a new expedition, even though you're well aware that you're going to face these dangers again, how do you process that in terms of, in terms of there's no way to completely mitigate those risks which you're facing? How do you sort of get yourself in the right mindset for that?
I think that is down to the pre-planning of the expedition. A lot of people say how, you can physically train, but how do you mentally train? And I sort of always look at the worst case scenarios that may happen when I'm on the adventure and almost try to visualize what they'll be like, what they'll feel like. And so when I'm on the expedition, if a worst case was to unfortunately happen, it doesn't come as a shock or a surprise. So it doesn't send me into flight mode, if you like, whoa, into shock. I wasn't expecting this and now I'm panicking. It comes as something I expected, I anticipated. Here it is, get through it and crack on. And so I think I don't blow each of the obstacles out of proportion. Even though it could be scary, it could be being held at gunpoint or whatever, it could be a case of, well, I did picture this. This was always likely to happen. So now that I'm looking the barrel or looking down the barrel of a gun, just adapt, stay calm, stay cool, get past this challenge and then crack on. So I think it is definitely in the mindset, the preparation beforehand.
And we're going to sort of touch upon many of these incidents and the mindset you've had to adopt for each.
Yes.
But I've also, since I knew you were coming on, I've also got your book, which is called Mission Possible, A Decade of Living Dangerously. This podcast is going to be out a week before Christmas. I have to recommend this book very strongly. There's no way that the time I'm going to spend with Ash today is going to replace the importance of getting that book. I thought it was a brilliant read.
No, appreciate that. Yeah, that's it. And there's a lot of stories sort of crammed into one book as well, isn't it? It goes back to sort of how I was raised, onto high school, college, sort of the mindset, the training, the discipline, working different jobs, working in a fish and chip shop. And then it's all of the adventures scattered, not just hiking and surviving, but also the cycling, and the Muay Thai and the scuba diving, and then the 2 world firsts before the Yangtze.
Well, let's put this into context. You have 3 world firsts, three records.
Yeah.
Why don't you just tell everyone, maybe in date order, what those 3 expeditions you went on was, and maybe just a couple of kind of the key stats around them in terms of time and that sort of thing.
Sure. So Mongolia was the first sort of big one. That was the most terrifying as well, because I had never done anything of this magnitude before. Done many adventures, but nothing quite this big. And it was 2014. I became the first recorded person to walk solo and unsupported across Mongolia. So that was 3 weeks over the Altai Mountains, 5 weeks across the Gobi Desert, and then a further 3 weeks through the Mongolian steppe, completely alone. You know, not like unsupported, the van follows me, but it has to stay 10 miles away. I mean, like nothing. I think there was such a low budget that I couldn't even afford proper evacuation, and my insurance was completely invalid because they don't insure people in Mongolia who are doing things solo or unsupported. And so because of the fact that I was alone, I had to carry all of my provisions needed to survive the 2.5 months across Mongolia in a wheeled trailer. And so it was built in a family friend's back garden. Again, all very low budget. I don't come from a financial background, so it was just, you know, asking for favors from family or friends. And that trailer weighed 120 kilograms or 18 stone or 260 pounds if people are in the US listening. And so, you know, it was demanding. I had to pull that thing over the mountains, across the desert. There were wolves. It dropped to minus 15, minus 20 degrees in the Altai Mountains where I was at altitude, to then 40 plus degrees Celsius in the desert. So that was the first one. Second one was Madagascar. I completed that in 2016, started in 2015. And that again was a world first, to become the first person to walk the entire length of the island, south to north via the interior, summiting the 8 highest mountains along the way. So sort of machete in hand, hacking my way through the jungle, hunting, gathering. That took, well, that was 155 days, 1,600 miles, whereas the Mongolia one was 1,500 miles and it took me 78 days. So it was only an extra 100 miles longer, but it almost doubled the duration. You know, that's how difficult Madagascar was.
Because of the terrain.
The terrain was intense. And I don't think out of those 155 days, seriously, I don't think there was one day where it just ended like, well, that was a pleasant hike. There was just challenge after challenge after challenge, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Definitely.
And then the Yangtze was the biggest yet. That was 2019. I completed that. Again, another world first, 4,000 miles. And this one took me 352 days to complete.
So that's a year.
From source to sea. Pretty much a year to complete. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're going to get to all of these, but it goes without saying that you're quite a remarkable person to be able to achieve these things. Well, no, I mean, I've just wanted to. It's interesting. Let's just talk about Mongolia being the first of those 3 expeditions. You mentioned this cart that you had. Can we get this up on the screen, Jacob, just to have a look at? Because when I'd heard you talking about this,
yeah,
but I couldn't visualize it until I found this photo. I think I found it either on your Instagram or on your website. And by the way, guys, we're going to put Ash's Instagram and his website on our socials. You've got to check them out. They're fantastic. But the only thing I could compare this to when I looked at it was a cart which goes on the back of a horse and cart.
Yeah, yeah.
And you were literally dragging it along. So there it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the that is pretty much carrying everything that I needed to survive. I don't know if you've got the photo there. I don't know if I've sent you the photo of me pulling it. If not, that's the trailer anyway, and you can sort of see its mass. It's yeah.
But it's, I mean, how physically are you dragging that? Is it with your hands?
So it's a 4-point harness, and so it connects over your shoulders, round your waist. You clip it all together, and you pull it. There you go.
Oh yeah, there it is.
That's the one. Yeah. So that was just after the first 3 weeks of the Mongolia. So I'd just broken out of the Altai Mountains, and you can actually see the mountains behind me in that image. And then I was now heading towards the Gobi Desert.
And what have you got on that cart? Are you talking about your kit, your food, your water?
Yeah. So this was an expedition where I'd be facing so many different climates and environments. So I needed sort of cold weather clothing for the Altai Mountains, but then I needed warm weather clothing for that of the Gobi Desert. I had 5 or 6 weeks worth of ration packs in the trailer, so 6 weeks of food with me. I had a blue container, which was 20 liters of water. So already that's 20 kilograms just in water. I had electronics because I was completely self-filming. So actually this image that you see, I had to put my trailer down, take my camera and tripod, run ahead of myself, set it up, put it in video mode, run back for my trailer, strap up, and walk past that camera in order to get this shot. There was no one there to help. It was just like completely out there. And so lots of food, the tent equipment, sleeping equipment, first aid. So all of that amounted to, 120 kilograms with a full load of water.
How does that, obviously the length that you walked in Mongolia in terms of, 78 days, 3 months of walking. 120 kilograms is a person and a half, isn't it? You're dragging.
Yeah.
How does that actually feel when you say halfway through the expedition? The fact that you're covering this ground with these challenges is one thing, but to have to do it with that weight that you're dragging, how does that feel just physically?
Yeah, at that point, at the halfway point, it's obviously you're really excited, you're pumped to get to the halfway. That is like a huge milestone. But already you've lost a lot of weight, you're skinnier, you're weaker, you're pretty beaten by the elements at that point. Your lips are all chapped. I remember in the morning, I'd wake up and I'd have to pull my lips apart pretty much. They were all scabbed over, I think because of the wind and because of the altitude, especially in the Altai. For a grim example, I'd have my porridge ration pack in the morning, I'd slurp it, and as I'd put the ration pack back down, there'd be a flow of blood and pus that would go into the, so your lips are in pain, you're sort of blistering, your toenails are dropping off, it's grim. So you're in a bad way, but mentally you're feeling great because that the hardest bit's now behind you. And you're halfway. You are halfway. Every day from there, you're getting closer to the finish line.
And is that halfway point, has that been significant on each of these 3 expeditions you've been on? That's a key moment.
It's a key moment, yeah. But I would say you can't think about it too much because there's still, I think when I almost died in the Gobi, I think that was just after the halfway point actually. And so you get to the halfway point, but you can't become complacent, you've got to really know that struggles are still ahead.
I was going to move on to this issue of your brush with death in Mongolia. What were the circumstances in which you encountered this trouble? What was the day or what was the occurrence which brought you close to death?
So along this route, me and my logistics manager, we had confirmed and unconfirmed water sources along the way. And so if there's an unconfirmed water source, this could be a well, and we don't know, it might be locked, it might be dry, the water might be stagnant, so it's unconfirmed. And so at a confirmed water source, we would always top up the container fully because we don't know if the next water source is confirmed. But when you're in the desert, and it's 40 plus degrees and it's 16 hours of daylight and you're sort of pulling this trailer, which now feels like 500 kilograms because the wheels are so thin that they're sinking into the soft sand. You go through more water. And so I went through quite a bit of water and then hit an unconfirmed water source. So now I knew that I had a hell of a distance, now rationing the last dribbles of water remaining to get to the next water source, which I know is confirmed. Whether I got there or not was sort of a big question mark for me at that time. And I thought, I'm feeling okay. I reckon I can make it. But as the days went on, I started to become more dehydrated, started to suffer with heat exhaustion, heat stroke. I was delirious. I was hallucinating. I could almost feel my insides drying up slightly. I was becoming very desperate. And it got to such a bad point that, picture the desert, pure blue sky, there's no clouds, there's no trees, there's no breeze. And sort of the only shelter that I could find, because there was no shade, was underneath my trailer. And it was at that point I realized that, hang on, every time I stop and hide from the heat under my trailer, I'm under there for an hour or so. And at this point, I'm gonna take way too long to reach the next water source. And it was at that point I realized, if I don't keep getting up and pushing on, I'm gonna die out here in the Gobi Desert. I'd already missed the point of pickup as well. I would need to allow at least 3 to 4 days for my logistics manager to get to me because it's car only, if he found me in time, and then another day or two to get me out Whereas at this point, I had 3 to 4 days left until I reached the confirmed water source. I didn't think I would survive 6 days, so I went with the way of I have to walk, otherwise I'm going to die. And whilst I couldn't really visualize those 4 days, because I'm a big believer in sort of the law of attraction visualization, but
breaking your goals down.
Yeah, I was in such agony that 4 days was it was too much. So what I did, I focused on, as you said, breaking the goals down and focus on 100 meters. I could see 100 meters in the distance. So I was like, I can definitely get there. And then I'll rest for no more than 5 minutes. So I became quite dogged, quite strict. I started to, I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I stopped thinking of friends and family and death, and thought, just focus on one thing, and that is surviving and breaking my goals down. And so I would walk 100 meters, hide for 5 minutes, 100 meters, hide for another 5. And this went on. It was agonizing, but I did just about make it to that next community. It took me a good 8 days to recover.
Well, let's come to that. You've mentioned a number of really interesting points there about how you were feeling and thinking when these challenges were emerging. I mean, first of all, when you got to that unconfirmed water source, were you hoping, beyond hope, that there would be water there? And how big a disappointment was it? How did you feel when you realised that there wasn't?
It was a bit of a panic, because all of the rest of not all of them, but most of the unconfirmed water sources that I'd come across had water. And so it never really crossed my mind that, it's not going to have water, So
you're quietly confident that it was going to have some.
Yeah, it was likely, so I was like, surely. And when I rocked up and, there was no water, that was a worry. I guess the plus side, I knew that the next water source is confirmed, and there is a town there, there's people, there's shelter. I could rest up if I make it.
But 4 days, you said you were going after you realised there was no water at that source.
Yeah.
And during that time, I mean, you described it so vividly in terms of stopping and then breaking your goals down per 100 meters. Mentally, what's happening then in terms of the enormity of the 4 days you've got ahead and this really sensible tactic you're using to break it down? Is there something inside your head though which is it sort of makes you feel a little overwhelmed with how many of those 100-meter stops and starts you've got ahead of you before you reach the safety of the community?
Yeah, there was. And I think it's like 4 days is a long time. And especially when we're back here 4 days, if you think 4 days of walking, it sounds like a huge distance, and it is. But I think because I had already walked so many weeks, I was already out there for a good month or so. 4 days at that point, I was like, it's doable. It's 4 more or 3 more sleeps. I've got it. And I think I had broken my way into sort of distances that I would walk per day. I had found the routine of how often I stop before the 100-meter marks. Just in general, I'd be taking a break every couple of hours to swig some water or whatnot, because I was always kind of rationing it in the desert anyway. And so when I realized that I've got 4 days and I was already in a bad, really bad state, yes, it was bad, but I guess I had no option, and I think that's really what stayed on my mind. It's like I haven't got time to think anything else other than making it to that next community, which has water.
And you've mentioned the effect that the dehydration was taking.
Yeah.
What were the hallucinations? What were you seeing which wasn't there?
It's not that I was seeing stuff as such. It was more of like mirages in the disc. It was kind of like that, and then I was following a track. Then it would almost feel like there was a few tracks, so I wouldn't see the few tracks split, but I was kind of almost seeing double. And what is weird is before this expedition, there was a guy who had attempted it before myself. He was actually the first person to attempt it. He claims, but he was evacuated I think it was just before, just after the halfway point, but he had good evacuation. I think he was picked up by helicopter because he had access to the right stuff and the funds were there. And I remember writing to him, asking him for, tips and advice, and he was a really nice guy. And he sent an email. This is when I was in Thailand right now, thinking of the idea of Mongolia. And I found this guy, and, I emailed him. And I asked him what dangers I should look out for. And he got back. He was there saying, look out for the grey wolves, the sandstorms, the snow blizzards, the drunken nomadic drifters, the stagnant water, the dry wells, the steep ravines, and the list went on. And that terrified me. So I had a lot of fear with this expedition. But something that stood out the most is at the bottom of this sort of email, he left this sort of quote or this piece of advice, and he said, incredible is the ability to continue no matter what. And I had no idea what he meant by that. That terrified me. I was like, what does he mean? Is he saying it's not possible? Because no one's incredible. So what does he mean by that? And he wished me all the best of luck. I think he attempted 2 or 3 times. But it was the sticking point was the halfway. And I think that was maybe down to lack of water, And anyway, so that saying never made sense to me up until when I was in the desert. And I should probably reach out to him really and thank him. But in the desert, when I was hallucinating and, those 4 days were going by, what allowed me to come up with that strategy to walk 100 meters and rest for 5 minutes was when I was really suffering under my trailer. I think we've got an image of me actually hiding under my trailer.
Oh, man. Yeah, I've seen this in your Instagram.
Yeah, lips sort of blistered. I thought, I've got to get this shot. This was at the beginning of it as well. It got so much worse. Well, that quote came to mind and I was like, what did he mean by that? Is this the point now where, I've missed the point of pickup? Am I dying here? What does he mean? Incredible is the ability to continue no matter what. And what I did is I pictured, if there was something that was incredible, what would it do in this scenario? It was almost like I was trying to look for a role model or for something that can show me the way. It was super free. I've never had it before. I've never had it since. And I kind of pictured, this thing that was also under the trailer, and it decided, it was breaking its goals down. It was getting up. It was walking ahead, and it was walking faster than me. And I got up from under my trailer, and I tried to keep up. My mind was scrambled at this point. I was delirious. And then it would hide under the trailer. Then I would hide. Then it would get up faster than me. So it was always one step ahead of me. And it was always going to get to the water source before I got there. And I just remember copying almost. It was almost like I was visualizing this invisible thing, or had this thing in my mind that was doing a strategy to survive this stint in the Gobi Desert. And I was trying to see it as a role model, something that I can look to, because there was nothing there for me. There was nothing to help me make a decision. There was nothing there to motivate me. So it's like I created something in my mind, and that was off the back of his saying that. He said, incredible is the ability to continue no matter what. I actually personified that word incredible, put it into person, and was like, right, I'm going to follow. And I couldn't keep up. It was faster, it was quicker, he was resting less. But effectively, I feel that's what
helped you moving forward.
Yeah, when your body's going through, your body's effectively slowly dying, isn't it?
And you've just one thing to hop about. What's a drunken nomadic drifter? And please tell me you didn't come across any of them.
I did come across them, but they were completely fine.
So this is just someone who's like wandering in the desert?
Not necessarily in the desert too, not too deep, mainly in the Altai Mountains.
Got you.
So this will be kind of like a nomad on his horse. Maybe he's been kicked out the gur by his wife or something, and he's been told to do one. And he's got his bottle of Russian vodka or whiskey, and he's just on horseback, feeling a little bit angry or upset. He'll be drinking away. And, I did approach some guys approached myself, who did seem to be a little bit aggressive. They were completely fine, mainly too drunk, and they would stumble and whatnot. But they would, try to take the trailer and lift it and show their strength and stuff. And it was one of those, I never felt in harm's way. It was like, yeah, let them crack on for a bit. They'll get bored and I'll continue. So I think that's what he meant when he said, look out for the drunken nomadic drifters. Luckily, mine were innocent encounters, but, maybe in the past, You
wouldn't want them to be too angry, would you?
Yeah, that's it.
When you got to them, I want to touch upon what this community was that you were able to get to, but by the time you actually reached there, it's a dreadful question to have to ask, but how much longer could you have gone on for had that community been deserted, for example, or gone away.
Yeah, I reckon maybe another 2 days.
Really?
And that's cutting it. Maybe one day. I like to think I could have pushed on another 2 days, but maybe I couldn't.
And is the community like a village, is it then?
Yeah, it was kind of like, which was weird. And it was funny because I could see it. It's there. It's in the distance. But it's never, it takes a long time to get to. If you can imagine it, it's completely flat. You see something in the distance and you're like, oh, I'll be there in a couple of hours. You won't. You'll be there that evening if you're lucky. It takes a long time to, especially when you're walking. So you'd see like a white felt tent or a yurt in the distance when you wake up in the morning, and you could be like, that's where I'm staying tonight. And it'll take you all day to walk to it.
And when you get there, do you have to sort of communicate with them your situation and what you need, or is it just obvious if you see someone?
Yeah, I think at that point, the way that I was stumbling and how red my face was and kind of blistered in a way, and how chapped my lips were, they instantly saw that I was in a horrific state. And straight away, I was kind of stumbling and falling, and they dragged me to one of their huts, which had a bed inside, and they put me on the bed. They got me lots of water, sugar and salts, because I was so, I was in a state. And so they were extremely hospitable, very friendly. And they just saw me and thought, whoa, he's in trouble. And they let me stay there then for the next 8 days. It took me to recover, not only physically, but mentally. I was, I was scared now it's at this point, some people may think, right, that's enough, I am quitting. Well,
I was going to ask you about that because, just to use my, not a great comparison at all, but I had a pulmonary embolism 10 years ago. It's like a lung clot.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I used to run quite a lot before that. And I first started to notice that kind of lung dysfunction, if you like, while I was running. And eventually...
How did you notice that? What did it feel like?
It felt just like, or the way I would describe it is it's as if your tubes leading to your lungs are clogged up.
Oh, whoa.
Almost as if...
Terrifying, hey.
I sort of compare it to... I used to sometimes think it was almost as if you needed to kind of just get like a hot wash down your kind of tubes.
Yeah.
But what happened in the end was I just collapsed. And sounds mental, but I've not ran since. And when I've worked with personal trainers in the past, they've offered the view that it's psychological because I can row, I can cycle, I can lift weights.
So it's all working again.
Exactly.
Got you.
But I don't have a problem in accepting it will be. So the fact that I haven't been able to get over that, but you in this state that you've had to go through, the fact that you then got up and finished walking across the rest of Mongolia is quite incredible. So
pretty stubborn.
what did you have to do to break down that fear and that sort of, because something inside you must be screaming, let's go home.
Yeah, I just had to analyze the next steps and sort of where I went wrong. And, I felt that I was rushing a lot of the first half of Mongolia. There was no need to rush. And so what I did is I was just always like, just take your time, because if you're taking your time, you're not going to drink as much water. And, I'm stubborn as well. I'd made it halfway. I think this was just over the halfway point. And I think for me, the worst thing was the thought of coming home, having people tap you on the shoulder and, oh, you tried your best. I was like, nah, I have to, I'm a man of my word. I said I'm going to do it. I have to finish it. And luckily I survived that stint. The worst I like to think is behind me. So now I must, go with patience, go a lot slower pace and make sure I'm always full on water. And that's what I did. And I think at that point I only had a week left or 2 weeks of the Gobi Desert. And so I would then break into the Mongolian steppe where there's more grassland, there's more rain, big thunderstorms actually. And so I kind of knew that the isolated section and the really hot section and lack of water was now behind me. After a good week or two, I'll be breaking into the steppe.
One thing I really wanted to ask you is at this stage, you're still in your early 20s, aren't you, when you did Mongolia?
Yeah, I was
sort of early mid-20s.
23. Yeah,
How,
24.
in terms of the level of preparation that you had to go through for this, which we'll get to,
Yeah.
and then obviously in terms of the period of time you actually spend doing this, which was 3 months in Mongolia and more like 6 months in Madagascar. How's that working just in terms of the life of a 23-year-old? Because, I mean, I'm sure your mates would have been focusing on women and on holidays with the lads and nights out and jobs and potentially looking to save for houses, etc. How did this all fit in with your life?
Yeah, it's a very unorthodox way. So taking it right back, when I was in high school, I went on to college, and the college course was an outdoor education. It was just 2 years. And after that course, everyone in my outdoor course were either going on to university or to the military, because that's kind of the standard what you'll do. They'll do like a degree in outdoor education or go on to the military. And with myself, it was on that 2-year college course that I found that I was really very much a kinesthetic learner, learning from hands-on practical experience, making the mistakes and then learning from those mistakes to correct them. And I just knew that the classroom just wasn't for me. That way of education wasn't for me. My way of education was, again, through experience, getting out there and throwing myself in the deep end. And so I had this idea, like, wouldn't it be great to do something similar to this college course, but test it in real life, work multiple jobs, save up as much money as I could, and then leave for traveling. I would be able to learn different cultures, traditions, understand different countries and their ways, understand myself and how I handle certain scenarios. And so once I started to think of that idea, I ran with it. I sold my car. It's only a little Renault Clio. I got a few £100 for it. I bought myself a little bicycle. I was cycling every day to and from work. I was working 240 hours a month. I went from working in a fish and chip shop to waiting on to then being a lifeguard. And it was at this point a friend wanted to join me, which was great. And I had a travel companion. But we kind of were like, it's all good going off traveling, but the money's going to run out. We'll be forced to come back home. And so we said, what can we do to sort of help us find work abroad to top up the funds in order to keep traveling? And so we decided on scuba diving. We were like, if we can climb the ladder in scuba diving, there's a lot of water out there and we're going to be traveling around lots of sort of tropical islands. Maybe we can work as a scuba diving instructor if we can climb the ranks. So we did. And then that's when we left, age 19. We decided against sort of the university way. We didn't know what was going to happen. Maybe just a gap year. But my idea was traveling around the world for 4 years, gaining lots of experience, lots of qualifications to really find what it is that I want to do in life before deciding when I don't really know if that's what I want to do. And I was taking on lots of crazy and reckless adventures. I was on the beaten track for a good 2-3 weeks in China, doing very touristic things, getting the same photos as everyone, being on the same route. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted my own experiences, my own adventures, my own stories, images and whatnot. So I was kind of said to my friend, what can we do that's different? And I remember after China, we went down to Cambodia. We were sat on the Mekong riverbank in Cambodia, sulking because we'd got the currency wrong and spent a lot more money than we anticipated. And I said, let's just get a bike. And I think this was the catalyst to all of these, I think to the life that I'm living now. I said, let's get a bicycle and let's just cycle the length of Cambodia and Vietnam. A cheap bike.
And this was before you did before Mongolia and obviously everything else you just do. It was cycling the length of countries which first ticked your boxes. Initially, not just the cycling. It was that sort of adventure that led to lots of different styles of adventure. Right.
But with that specific one, we were like, let's stop spending money on the bus, go into all of the typical sort of tourist spots, missing the real local way of life. And let's get a bike, £10, get a tent, non-waterproof, £2.50. We don't need a pump. We don't need a puncture repair kit because we'll ask the locals if they can help along the way. We had no map. We had no gears, no suspension, literally little old granny bikes, a basket on the front, a little bell, a piece of string that we found on the roadside that we used to strap our rucksack onto the back, and we left. And that was about 2.5 weeks. It was 1,100 plus miles. The bikes broke about 17 times in total. We were hit by mopeds. We were dodged by lorries. We were chased by dogs. We really integrated with the locals and got to know the true Vietnamese people and Cambodian locals. And at that point, that was huge. We completed it. And I remember thinking, I want to do more of the same, more like this. And then we got rid of the bikes. They collapsed. They were in no state. We gave them away.
I was just going to ask you, can you say, please fix my puncture in Cambodian? I don't know if that's actually a language, but...
No, like I couldn't. We would just rock it. I remember one time was 2 or 2:30 in the morning. Got a puncture, and we were right in the mountains at this point. We had to walk for a good 5 to 10 miles. And then we came across this small town and we saw locals that their light was still on. It's kind of like a wooden hut that they were in on the side of the road. And so, we just walked in, beards sort of messed up, hair sticking up, flies still in them. Our skin was purple because this sunscreen of the day had mixed with the mosquito spray of the night. So we looked hideous, we were looked like we were on drugs potentially, especially with our eyes wide open and they're all really red. And anyway, these locals they just saw, we just point to the bike and, just smiling, be friendly, trying to talk, trying to say as many words as you can. And, they were always super helpful and they fixed it up. We'd offer them money they wouldn't accept and we continued to cycle. And that's how we got by for the 1,100 plus miles, was just the kindness of the locals along the way.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because, that seems consistent as well with what you were saying earlier about the community you came across in Mongolia who helped you for those 8 days.
Yeah.
It is noteworthy, isn't it, that these are people who won't have an awful lot, who won't have a westernized way of life, and yet the kindness they showed and the empathy they showed is probably over and above what many people in a much better material position, if I could put it that way. Is that what you found?
100% all the way throughout. Maybe not in south of Madagascar, which we'll get to that, and I'll tell you why. I think they're just a little bit more desperate there because they are living a hard life where they don't even have access to fresh water, so they're a little bit more desperate and, that shows. But everywhere else that I've traveled, they are completely I think if you're there on the tourist trail, all of the locals have sort of adapted. These travelers, they've got money, and they lose their true kindness and they've got used to it. They ask for what they want. They'll try to rip you off. But when you're off that track and you're in the sort of rural areas, they're just decent people. They've got everything they need. They don't want anything from you. And you can't really give them anything that will make their life better anyway, because they're happy. And I did notice that in many countries on the travels, for sure.
I think there's something we could all learn from that, isn't there, really? But it's clearly something which has helped you a great deal.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Madagascar. Reminder, that was basically double the time, so 6 months.
Yeah.
Just before we go into any of the detail on that, you mentioned Ration Packs earlier, which I know, when I've heard you talk before, is something that you've continued to use as your nutrition. Yeah. So are they like dried meals?
That's it. Yeah. Oh, okay. Dried meals. You just boil the water, pour them in, wait 10, 15 minutes, and they're good to go. Could be chicken tikka masala, spaghetti bolognese, raspberries and porridge. It's good. Good food.
And is it quite carb heavy, is it then? Because the amount of energy you must burn.
I think with the Mongolia, I was taking in around 1,600 calories a day, which is obviously nowhere near enough. And I lost about 13 kilograms in total. And I think there were a few days where I woke up at 5:30. I had my ration pack at 6, and then I would have to walk a full sort of 14, 16 hours before I had my next bit of food, pulling the trailer in that heat, So I was losing a lot of weight. It wasn't healthy.
Because I mean, you're not a huge guy. I mean, you're quite lean and mean anyway. So was that?
Yeah, it was a lot heavier than me. Yeah, like the trailer. What I'm about 11 stone. The trailer is 18 stone, so I'm pulling more than my weight through. That's pretty much the same weight as a heavyweight boxer, isn't it? It's about that.
What in terms of Madagascar? Am I right in thinking that you didn't have the trailer with you then?
Yeah, I didn't need the trailer in Madagascar. The only reason I needed the trailer in Mongolia was just how vastly sort of populated it is.
Absolutely.
I think there's only 3 to 4 million people living in Mongolia, and a high majority of those are in the capital city. And Mongolia is a massive, massive country. You could fit the UK in there, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times. And there's only 3 to 4 million people compared to what we've got here, maybe 75 million.
So in Madagascar, in your planning, did you know that there were more of these communities along the way? Yeah,
more people. I think it's a population of about 24 million people when I started in Madagascar. So I knew that there were more people, more communities. There's definitely more water because you're sort of up against jungle terrain, and you're in the mountains. And another important factor is it would have just been simply impossible to pull the trailer through Madagascar. It would take me on a bad day maybe 14 hours to walk 2-3 miles, machete in hand, just bamboo everywhere. Like, you would not be able to pull the trailer.
Well, describe that terrain then, because I mean, 2 to 3 miles in a day is hard going, isn't it?
Yeah.
What describe that jungle? Is it just dense foliage, is it?
Yeah,
here we are.
Yeah, especially up north. This is actually pretty spaced out as well. Sometimes you would get bamboo, which could be, 2 fists thick. And you have to hack through them because they are like inches apart from each other. You can't squeeze through the gap. So you might swipe 5, 6, 7 times to break it down. And then you might take a step to the next one. And then you take another step. And so that's why, 14 hours we would cover 2, maybe 3 miles because we were just in thick jungle. With this image here, actually, a perfect example, we found this sort of stream and it opened up. So we were like, perfect, let's see if we can follow this upstream, because this is in the direction that we're coming. It turned into a river. And then we were faced with a waterfall, and that pushed us back into the jungle, machete back in hand and hacking through. So it was just intense. And of course, you've got the bamboo shards shooting up, you're being stabbed. You've got the leeches that will drop from the jungle canopy down your top. So, often I would wake up, when I'm going to bed, I'd take my shirt off and I'd have to apply like 6, 7 leeches and flick them out the tent.
It might sound like a stupid question, but how did you know that there was no piranhas in that stream? Because I don't think I'd be willing to be sticking my toe in that.
There's no piranhas in Madagascar. In fact, Madagascar is fairly safe in terms of there's no venomous snakes or spiders.
But you got a heck of a spider.
Right.
Was it? Because have you got that photo, Jacob, from Ash's Instagram where I think it's of a spider bite? Is that in Madagascar?
Yeah.
Because he might not be venomous, but he's got a first set of fangs on him, whoever's got a grip of you there.
Yeah, and that infected as well. So as I was hacking through, it must have dropped down my top. So I didn't even see it was a spider. I didn't even know it was a spider bite. It just dropped down my top, bit me, a couple of times before it escaped. And it was when I was showing the locals that they told me what kind of spider it is. And that just infected. So we would have to, any sort of aloe vera plants that we'd come across, we'd break it off and, help to.
And was there a fair few of them about, were there?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, lots of vegetation, and that's where we were doing some hunting and gathering as well. We would hunt down little rodents that would burrow under trees, good meaty snack. And then for gathering, there's lots from sugarcane to chilies to mangoes to coconuts. So we would just scramble up the trees, hack them down.
And was it clear what you could eat and what you couldn't in terms of what was safe?
Yeah, it was clear. Mainly because I had a guide called Max with me who spoke English, and he was a proper bushman.
Right.
Knew his survival. So he was really teaching me a lot. And that's what I like. So I've got no military background. So I haven't learned sort of survival from the military. I've learned it from the locals who have been kind enough to, show me the ropes in terms of their environment, their terrain. Because of course it's different sort of where you are, right? Like the Mongolians will learn how to survive differently to the Burmese hill tribe, and then to the Madagascar jungle communities. So I would always spend a little bit of time with these people before I go on an expedition and hope that I can take, some knowledge, some tips from those guys, because they're just so knowledgeable. It's crazy because they do it every day, right, to survive.
Staying alive involves them being knowledgeable, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
What, in terms of how you would combine your ration packs with the expectation that you would encounter communities along the way who would help you, how do you do that? Do you sort of have a certain number of days of ration packs and then you work on the basis that this community is going to be at a certain point?
Yeah, so actually with Madagascar, I don't think I took any ration packs. Maybe I took a few at the beginning, but then after that, it was just, this wasn't a solo and unsupported journey in Madagascar. The record was just to complete the expedition. And so, we would come across locals often, and, any food that they had, we would fill up the rucksacks and we'd be like, okay, there's another 7 or 8 days before the next community. So we need to take from this community 7 to 8 days worth of food that would then last us.
You mentioned money earlier, that on the journey, people didn't want money. Did you have money with you?
Yeah, I'd always take cash with me on all of the expeditions. And the only place where they did, want money was south of Madagascar. That was pretty intense down there. People like literally living on the coast, sort of in shacks that they've built or little huts from wood where they have to build their home every 2 to 3 months, just within the sand dunes. They have nothing for food that day. They wake up, the man of the hut wakes up at 3 a.m. He'll go out sailing. He'll catch as many fish as he can. He'll come back. He'll then walk for 3 hours to the community and he'll trade half of those fish for rice. And then he'll come back and they'll be having fish and rice that day. And that's their life, looking for fresh water and making sure that they can get as many fish or any fish so that they can trade half with the community and they've got rice and fish. So they literally don't know what or how much they're eating when they wake up that morning.
And one of the most remarkable parts of the book was when you talk about you contracting malaria. Quite astonishing. Tell everyone how it came to be that you because I know malaria is a serious problem in Madagascar.
Yeah.
Just because we're all such experts on immunisation and vaccines now, couldn't you have got kind of vaccinated up to the teeth beforehand?
No malaria vaccine. But you can take doxycycline or Malarone. And so when I was out there, I was taking doxycycline, which covers you, it's just a pill, it is, and that covers you about 80%, and you've got to take it every day. And so I was doing that, but then I came across this community, and crazily enough, and I was pre-warned by my logistics manager, but this community happened to be suffering with the bubonic plague, an ancient disease,
Wow.
and they still have it there in some communities across Madagascar. And so we arrived. It was me, Max, it was me, my guide who was called Me, and Joe, who decided he just wanted to stay with us. And so we rocked up at this community and asked if we can have food, water, and if we could stay the night. And they said, you can stay, but get straight into your tents because this place is rife with the bubonic plague. We'll cook you your food. We'll bring you the water to the tent. And so each time they bring water, we zip it and, take the water or the food or whatever. Because there was lots of rats and dogs around as well. And it's the fleas, isn't it?
Of course.
With the bubonic plague. And so they cooked us up a meal, brought it out to us, and it was eel. It was rice and eel. And this eel smelled pretty funky. And it didn't look too good, but we were super hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we all ate this eel and rice. And so for the next few days after that, all three of us were suffering. We had severe diarrhea.
Yeah, of course.
And so these pills were pretty much going in one way, out the other. So they only protect you about 80% anyway. And so I probably only had about 40% fighting against. And, a mosquito came by and bit me, and then effectively I didn't have the strong enough dose to fight off the malaria, and I eventually caught it and it's a weird one because I had falciparum, so that's the deadliest strain. There's 4 strains. There's falciparum, and that's the only strain that you can actually clear fully out of your system. However, it's the deadliest, so if you don't catch it within 24 hours, you're dead.
And were you keeping walking after? I mean, no, you wouldn't have known you had malaria, did you? Did you just think it was the eel, which was the problem? All right, okay.
Exactly. So I just put it down to the eel, and it was the eel, but eventually malaria got hold, and whilst me and Joe recovered, not me, but my guide whilst me and Joe had recovered, I hadn't recovered and was still getting worse.
So you just think you were dehydrated or something?
Yeah, it was similar symptoms to that of the Gobi Desert. And I was kind of like, maybe I'm dehydrated. And I remember drinking a lot, thinking I couldn't have made this mistake again, surely. I pushed on and I was walking. So I was walking for about 4 days, made it to a community. I was still in a bad way. And, it must have been a week that had gone by when I decided I need to get to a hospital. So that community that I was in had overland transport, and 3 hours away was a city called Fianarantsoa. So they took me there. It was kind of off-road. And when I rocked up, I was in a really bad way. And I was in such a bad way that I normally wouldn't say I need to go to a hospital. I'd be like, no, let's give it another day. We'll see how we do. I'll drink lots of water. But I remember that morning I woke up, and there was this mental battle. Part of me was saying, go to sleep, it will be a painless death. And the other half was sort of screaming, saying, you've got something, you've got some sort of disease. And it was screaming, get up, wake up. And I remember waking up and, I was strong and capable, but I went to feeling so weak and I wasn't even able to pick up a glass of water. It hit me hard. And then I shouted for me, who came, and I told him, I'm struggling here. I've got a disease. I don't know what I've got. I've got something. And it was him that took me to the car. I rocked up, and the doctor said if you were 2 or 3 hours later, you would have potentially slipped into a coma, and it would have been difficult to get you back.
2 or 3 hours?
Yeah, and so it was, if I had decided to go back to sleep or listen to that, whatever went on, again, I was hallucinating, delirious, all of that. And I just remember hearing the side that was just screaming. And it took me ages. This was a mental battle that went on for about 45 minutes before I actually sat up and tried to have a drink of water, and then shouted me. And I said, I need to get going. I've got something here. And he took me, and the doctor said, he took my blood test within 5 minutes. You've got falciparum. And I was like, what's that? She was like, it's the worst form of malaria. And a few hours later, on arrival, you would slip into a coma. And
what was the period of recuperation after getting a disease of that severity?
It took me 8 to 9 days, which was a fast bounce back, actually. Any longer, just a few hours longer, it would have taken a long time. And on that expedition, I had better insurance, so I did have insurance that would cover the helicopter that would be on standby, take me to Johannesburg, mainland Africa, and get me sorted. Luckily, I didn't need that. But after a good 13 days altogether, so 8 days to recover, but 13 days to have it fully out of your system. So I don't have malaria in my system anymore. Whereas if it was the 3 lower strains, they're not as deadly, but you've got them for life, and they might poke their ugly head out every so often, And so it was kind of a negative, but a positive, and I like to be positive. So.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing which is most remarkable about all this is after 8 or 9 days, you got up out of bed and then walked across the remainder of Madagascar.
Yeah.
What was, because you had literally, excuse me, you'd acknowledged and been told that you were close to dying. Was that mental voice saying, go home, stop, was that louder then than it was, for example, in Mongolia when you were dehydrated?
I think for those 8 days that it took me to recover, sort of the quicker I recovered, or the longer time I spent in Fianarantsoa recovering, the more of my mindset came back in my positive self. But certainly for the first few days, I hated everything. I was just like not in the right frame of mind at all. I was angry how that happened. I was upset. I was pissed off. I was just like, damn, And I always kind of knew that malaria was a risk of Madagascar, but I thought I'd mitigated it. I was taking my doxycycline. That should have been enough, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together with the eel, and that's how it got me. But that's also how I was able to last 5 days. It kills you within 24 hours. I survived 5 days. Otherwise, if it was 24 hours, I would have still been stuck where there's no vehicle transport and I would have died anyway. And so I was at a point where I was taking the pills still. It covered me 40%. And that was enough to let me survive an extra few days that I needed to get to the city in the first place. Because Falsiporan, it takes you within a day. 2 days if you're lucky. And so 5 days is just ridiculous. I was very lucky. That was the pills doing its job.
But it's got to also be the fact that you were in such good physical shape and so fit. That must have helped you fight through it as well.
Yeah, I think that, and I definitely think so. Like all of the previous experience with the previous ventures, the sleep deprivation that I faced in Vietnam, the dehydration of Mongolia. I'd done a lot of early adventures when I was 19, 20, 21 onwards across Southeast Asia and Australia, where I really put my body through it. So my immune system was fully awake, my senses were there, and I had faced a lot of shit before in the past that I think hopefully my body was like, we face something similar. Let's go further.
Through it. Yeah. I've seen I'm just on your Instagram, just sort of piecing everything together in terms of what happens when. Is this photo of you with a chicken coming out of your backpack? Is that in Madagascar?
Yes.
Is that the closest thing you could get to a takeaway?
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the score there? Why have you got a chicken in your backpack?
And yeah, I'd say he's gone viral. Little Gertrude is his name. I know that he's a cockerel. He's male, but I've given him a female name, female German name. I think Gertrude's a German name, actually. No idea. I've got this habit, and hopefully no one knows anyone called Gertrude, but I've got this habit where I just call things that are with me on my adventures just ridiculous names. My bicycle across Vietnam was called Elder. And then my bike across Australia, I cycled across South Australia, I think that was called Yolowen, a Welsh name. And now with this chicken, I'm just like, I got no choice. I'm going to have to take you with me. We will call you Gertrude the chicken.
why did you have to take the chicken with you? Was it was it like a food issue?
Yeah, so it's a tradition. It's a culture. In order to summit the highest mountain in Madagascar called Maramacotro, you have to take a white cockerel, has to be white. You have to take a white cockerel chicken with you. And they say that you have to carry it because it protects you from the bad spirits and witches of the rainforest, which they really, really believe in and have their own stories of bad spirits and witches. So I was kind of like, oh God, here we go. But where on all of my adventures, I've always respected the local culture and tradition, of course. And so I agreed, I will be protected from the witches and bad spirits by my good chicken called Gertrude. And there he, and there he is. So I had him 2.5 weeks. He summited 2 different mountains. There he is. That's the top of Maramacotro.
I mean, your bag must have been in a bit of a state after 2.5 weeks, wasn't it?
A hideous state. And the top of my tent, because he became fully domesticated, almost like a dog. So I didn't need to tie him up. I let him loose and he would follow me everywhere. And at nighttime, he would jump on my tent. He would sleep so that shit either side of my tent. If it was sunny, he'd be fine to get out and walk around. But if it was rainy, he wanted to be in my backpack. So I'd have to put him in my backpack. And it was annoying, you're hacking through jungle, 14, 16 hours, you're hungry, you're angry, you've got these flies trying to get in your eyes, you've got mosquitoes biting you, you've not eaten, you're thirsty, you're bleeding from spider bites, you're prying off these leeches, you're only covering like a mile every few hours, and then you've got Gertrude just I just wanted to take the machete.
Well, because obviously, I'm assuming no evil spirits got to you, so Gertrude did his job. What did you have to let him go at the end of it then?
Yeah, this was his freedom day, so this is where we set him free, and he just cracks on for the next 24 hours before the cyclone season takes him.
Oh my God.
Unfortunately, I was trying to get him back down the mountain. I was like, look, Max is Malagasy. I was like, can I take him back down? This is crazy. He's going to cause no harm. They were like, no, it's taboo. The locals of the next community will be so angry at you because you're effectively introducing all the bad spirits and witches that he's collected on the way up. you're bringing them to their community.
Oh, got you. So he's got to depart at that point.
If anyone was to get sick or if anyone was to die, like even 2 years later, they'd be like, that's Gertrude, that's Ash, that white Westerner bringing that chicken Gertrude to our community that killed this guy. So
you blot your copybook there, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and so I had to respect that, and I was kind of fed him lots of worms on the way up. I put him under a rock so that he could shelter from the rain, but it was freezing and it was very stormy. He may have survived. Who knows?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
He may have survived.
I think we'd like to. It's a wonderful photo, isn't it? Yeah. And we just like to think. I don't think he'd be watching, but if he is, then fair play to you.
There'll be like lots of white chickens on the top of that mountain, though. Mount Gertrude.
And I mean, in terms of what happened next, because I mean, you went from again, you doubled your next expedition because China, we walked the whole length of the Yangtze River.
Yes.
And that was the best part of a year, only a few days short of a year.
Yeah.
But the actual mileage you did more than doubled because that was 4,000 miles, was it?
4,000, yeah.
And what, I mean, one of the things when I just looked at some of your photography, it's just so beautiful, is the terrain in China just is not what you have in your mind as a Westerner. Have you got that one, Jacob, of Ash stood, I think it's like, is it in front of like a big lake and you got mountains in the back? Is that the one?
That's it.
You see, you think of China as being quite city heavy, don't you? That's what tends to come to mind.
Yeah.
But I mean, this obviously is something completely different. How do you compare the walk in China in terms of the terrain and the weather to what you encountered in Madagascar?
Completely different. I think all three have been completely different. I would say with China, it was big time mountains, high altitude, bears and wolves. With Mongolia, what stands out there was the desert, it was Gobi Desert. And then with Madagascar, the highlight there was probably the jungles up north. So three completely different environments in different weather systems, terrains, you name it. And with that image, that's the Yangtze River behind me. That's the bend. And you've got those mountains that will just stretch on for hundreds and hundreds of miles, you could go days without seeing any locals. I don't think I have ever felt so vulnerable than in the west of China, bordering Tibet, up in Qinghai province, where I was stalked by a pack of wolves for a number of days. I was told by the locals that I'm a fool for being up at the mountains during the hunting season, where the bears are coming off the mountain peaks because it's cold and they're looking for extra food, extra calories before they go into torpor, which is kind of like hibernation.
And are you allowed to carry like a gun or anything?
No.
Right.
And I had my knife confiscated, so the locals would always give me with a knife, like that would do anything against
You're not going to get far with a grizzly with a knife, though, I suppose, either.
I had a whistle, I had an air horn, and I kind of went with my sort of healthy Western mindset of leave the bears alone and they'll leave you alone. And I believed that, but the locals were just, they were laughing at that. They were laughing at my air horn. They laughed at my whistle.
So what was the purpose of them? To kind of scare the bears off?
Yeah, so the most common attacks in west of China happen when a local will stumble upon a bear on accident, and the bear won't
startles them.
Yeah, that's in the hunting season. If a local stumbles amongst the bear, I'm sure that bear will be like, happy days. Here's my food. But for the rest of the year, they're not out looking to eat human meat. But if they feel threatened, they will attack you and they'll kill you. And so you've got to warn the bears. You have got the whistle, it does help. So if they can hear you coming,
I've got you.
They'll normally scatter away because they don't want anything to do with you. But with my expedition being delayed 2.5 months from starting, that put me in a season whereby it is very dangerous and you can blow all the whistles and air horns you want. The bears will come at you.
And what sort of bears are they? Are they brown bears or grizzlies?
Yeah, they are Tibetan brown bears. So
they're huge, aren't they?
Yeah, they're not as big as your grizzlies.
Right.
but they're still big. They're big enough, you know. They are big. I've got a video. It's on my Instagram. It'd be a good one to show, actually. It's a guy running up a lorry, running from the bear, and the bear is running up the lorry after him. And if he wasn't as agile as he was, he wouldn't have escaped its jaws, you know.
Well, by the time we release, we'll make sure that's on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned the expedition being delayed. What was the reason for that?
So this was the toughest expedition to plan by far. I think just because of the sensitivities of going not just to China, but the west of China, bordering with Tibet.
Because there's some political sensitivity there, isn't there?
Major political sensitivity, yeah, on a huge scale. So, you know, for me, it took 2 years to plan this expedition. I had to get a production team, a marketing team, and then in order to get access to the source, they needed to make me temporary doctor for a year so that I could be ambassador for the Green Development Organization. And I had to be ambassador to get access to them because they're the ones that would then introduce me to the Three Sources National Park. And once I get access to the Three Sources National Park, they can introduce me to the Qinghai government, the province where the source of the Yangtze lies, which I needed in order to get permission. But also, I needed to reach out to them and be connected with them so that they could offer me protection from the authorities. And so this went on like that for 13, 14 different sort of organizations that I needed, stamped and signed, laminated documents, carrying them in my backpack.
That's what you were saying, Eddie, the preparation and planning.
So this took a long
unbelievable.
time. Yeah, it took a hell of a long time. And then I had issues with the crew. It's funny, you sort of can train yourself. And I think the beauty with Mongolia and with Madagascar, there wasn't many people that joined me in Madagascar at all. And the people that joined me, they were hard as nails, you know. So they could withstand sort of the elements and terrains that we were hacking through. Whereas with the Yangtze River, we were filming for Nat Geo. We needed the right film crew. We needed good guides. And this is where the trouble lied. I was training myself physically and mentally, and I don't know why it just slipped my mind. I didn't think about the people joining me because I just thought they'll prepare themselves in the correct manner, in the correct way. But they didn't, and they were just dropping off like flies, you know, altitude sickness, fear of wildlife. We were over 5,100 meters. So that's equivalent to Everest Base Camp, just at starting point where the Yangtze is. And so, and even my guide, my Tibetan guide, I brought him on board, and he was there to get me out of the mountains if I got altitude sickness. But he was the one that got altitude sickness, vomiting, bleeding from the nose, and I had to take him out of the mountains, which delayed me another 2 weeks because we had to go back to the community. He then said he's not coming back to the mountains with me. So I needed to then spend another 2 weeks with the team in Beijing looking for the next
troops,
guide, the next film crew. We lost 4 or 5 members before day one. So the journey hadn't even started. And then come month number 3, we had lost 10 of the 16 different people that joined me. When I say lost, I don't mean lost their lives.
They just couldn't go any further.
Altitude, fear of wildlife, injury.
And did it sort of ever occur to you at that point to turn back?
No, because I knew their reasons were, their fear was greater than mine, I think. I had 2 years to really visualize and plan and understand what I was going up against. Whereas the people joining me, they had weeks, if not months, to get in shape and get ready mentally, and they probably don't have the experience that I have. So when they were joining me, I think they were just hit by the harsh reality of this is intense, or this is scary, or it's one thing. And, you know, I had the same with Mongolia. It's one thing sort of planning the journey and being in a positive mindset, thinking, yeah, I can get through the desert. It'll be easy work. I just make sure I keep drinking, get food, done. But then when you're there and you're hit by the loneliness, I think I went over 8 days without seeing a single person. There's the vulnerability. And it is not a game where it's winning or losing. It's living or dying. And you've got these obstacles. You're being blasted by snow blizzards, sandstorms. You've got a pack of wolves stalking you. That can overwhelm you. And a lot of people will just hit the flight and be like, whoa, I'm out of here. But I didn't think about that because I'd never really done many expeditions with people before other than guides joining me. So when they joined me on the Yangtze and they were all dropping off, that's when I put a close on the expedition and stopped people joining me until I reached the halfway point, which was 6 months in. And then I opened it up because I knew that it's going to get easier now. We're coming across more cities, major cities, towns, the lot. So
you mentioned being stalked by a pack of wolves, which is about the most scary thing anyone has ever said to me. How did you know they were following you? Could you see them following you?
Yeah, it's a funny one how this happened actually. So it was myself, and I had an American videographer with me who was fluent in Mandarin. He's amazing at Mandarin. And anyway, we're in Qinghai, which they speak more Tibetan. And so he couldn't now communicate with these 3 guys that we had just come across. And so these guys, they're in a pretty worrying way. They're warning us against something, but we don't quite understand what they're trying to warn us against. They just point in, and we had that a lot of people saying, you can't be here, it's dangerous, but we would still do it. And anyway, Kyle, great videographer, he films all of it anyway. He doesn't know what they're saying, but he's filming them, sort of desperately advised me against something for some reason, but we're just like, we don't know, thank you, bye-bye, and we carry on walking. And then for the next 2 days, there's this pack of wolves, and we can hear them howling. We can see they're kind of on the opposite side, on the other side of the mountain, and they're always on our tail. They cover much better distance than man can cover, but they were still for the next couple of days just staying, and I think they were probably watching, let's see if he's injured or not.
What about when you're in your tent?
Well, yeah, when we're in the tent, lucky it was 2 of us. We wouldn't open up food, we could get a fire going, that would normally keep them at bay. But anyway, fast forward 6 months, and the footage that Kyle filmed, that's now been sent to my team in Beijing, the editing team putting together the documentary. And one of the girls there calls me when I had a signal in the city. This is 6 months on. And she's laughing. She's laughing about, what these locals are saying. She can speak Tibetan. I'm like, what were they saying? And she said, they're saying that down that valley where you're about to go, only yesterday, a local lady was killed by a pack of wolves. Don't find a different way. Go up, go round. Just don't go down there. But we didn't know what they were saying. So we were just like, bye-bye, thank you. And we carried on walking. And then, whether it was the same pack of wolves that killed that, that local or not, I don't know. But it pretty much matches up.
You don't need wolves in your life, do you? That's the long and short. That's the moral of the story, I think. What about? You mentioned your signal and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What are you carrying with you in terms of communication? Do you have a phone?
This was the other sensitive bit. I had crazy satellite technology with me, and so for that we needed to approach another organisation to get access to blah blah blah. That it goes on, and we had the stamped and signature approval on a document to say that we could carry the beacons and satellite technology that I had with me, because of course it's super sensitive. You're not allowed that stuff. They don't have Facebook, Google, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, none of it. They have all their own. So I needed to get started on all of their social media platforms and had my own team who would see what I'm sharing on Insta and whatnot, and they were able to translate and get it out there on the Chinese social platforms too. I
was going to ask you about that because, did you encounter any of the Chinese authorities, the police, or
yes?
Because I have this, and it may be an inaccurate depiction of sort of corruption and huge censorship and sensitivity. First of all, did you encounter any of the authorities? And secondly, did you encounter any of that?
Yeah, I think I was taken in by the police 5 times. There was one time where it was annoying as well because they would always sort of approach the tent in the middle of the night, say 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And I'll tell you how we found that out. But effectively, the police would rock up on the tent in the middle of the wild. We would get put into the car. We'd have to leave the horse, cast a choy, staked into the ground, and they would drive us hours. I think the longest was 6 hours, and they crossed us over into Tibet, took us to the government officers, and started to question me. And they could have. I faced the threat of being deported as well, and at any other time they could have deported me, but because of the 2 years planning and prep, I just had too much backup. I just had the documents stamped. I had the Qinghai government saying, if you see Ash, you take him back to where you picked him up from and leave him to crack on. And so they were all quite annoyed by that. And again, that's the planning. You've got to, not like my first adventures, which was so reckless with no planning. With this, it was, I knew that this was a crazy option, and that it was possible that they could deport me. But yeah, no, 5 different times. And they had to take me back to where they picked me up from, and I was able to crack on.
And you mentioned right at the start, sorry to cut across you, that you had a gun. Was that in China? A gun sort of pointed at you. Was that in China or was that?
Madagascar.
Oh, was it? Right, okay.
Yeah. So Madagascar, there was a lot. So Madagascar, there was the crocodile river crossings that I had. There's many crocodiles in many of the rivers along the way. Not all of them, but many. And sometimes we'd have to build a raft, sort of using natural resources, bamboo leaves, strap it together and try to get across this river, not knowing what lies beneath. Are they crocs? Are they not? Who knows? But let's not risk it. Let's build a raft, which would take 4 hours. So there was that. There was the military. Yes. So they're not really corrupt in China. They'll do things really by the books.
Right.
Yeah, they'll really do it by the book. And that's good and it's bad. In Madagascar, you could offer them a little bit more cash and they'll put an extra 2 months in your passport. They'll give you a 2-month visa. China, you can't do that. You could be Brad Pitt. You could have all the money in the world. They've cancelled shows by big names, Katy Perry, concerts done just because of
visa
wearing.
Issues.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Wearing a dress which kind of had like a symbol which is offensive in the Tibetan culture. So they cancelled like all 20 or 30 concerts. They didn't care who she was, how much money they offer. Boom, you're done. It's it's intense. So that, but it's also a good thing because they won't try to screw you over or they won't hold a gun at you like they would in Madagascar. In Madagascar, it was pretty aggressive down south.
And that's interesting about China. How did you find the people in China and just sort of the way of life there? Because I think we have this perception, don't we, of dictatorial government, censorship, people disappearing, all these sort of things which are reported in the media.
Yeah.
Did you? How did you perceive their way of life or their morale or what they're like as people?
I could live there. In all fairness, I really see the media and I know that it's definitely corrupt in some ways and it's always the government. It's never really the people, and I feel the people get a bad name for what the government does. But when I was there, everyone's happy, everyone's smiling, everyone's out in the morning working or exercising. And that's, following the whole course of the Yangtze River. I saw that throughout. And funny, I had a friend join me and he kind of said towards the end, he joined me for like a week or 2. And at the end, he said, it's crazy. My vision of China has completely changed. He had at first like this image of all of the locals being suppressed and they have to do as they're told and whatnot. And instead, he left with this vision of they're all happy people. He didn't meet one moody Chinese person. Of course, they are, but he just left with a really positive feel and vibe of the Chinese people and China in general.
That's so, you've got to keep an open mind, haven't you?
Yeah. Because I was the same. I kind of went there and I thought this will be interesting. And you feel the pressure a little bit in Beijing, very political sort of city there. But outside of Beijing and throughout, you don't get a feel for the politics. People are just doing good things and living their life. And it's not that heavily restricted in regards to how we perceive it.
It's fascinating.
It's such a cool place. I just love it. Yeah, I love it.
And how did it feel after trekking for nearly a year? How did the finish line feel?
Amazing. Yeah. It was it's funny when you finish something that big, it's not like a race, like a Usain Bolt race. Like he knows whether he's succeeded or failed within, what's his record, like 9 seconds, something. With myself, it's a whole year of walking. You get to a point where nothing's going to stop you, but you still have to finish the remaining 3 months of walking. And those last 3 months can be the worst because it's now on a road. You're not in the wild. There's no real dangers in terms of wolves or bears. You're in this humid city after city on tarmac right next to the river, which is almost really hard mentally. So by the time you get to the finish line, You're more like, it's about damn time, you know. But you
It's a
do
different
get that
sort of
sense relief.
motivation, isn't it? If you're not facing those risks and those challenges, but you've got to keep motivated and keep moving forward.
Yeah, because I feel the excitement of, you know, at the start of a race or start of something where the outcome is fast, knowing, you know, you could be overwhelmed, you know, the crowd sort of cheering, but after like a year long, it's not the same feeling because you don't know, you finished the journey like 8 months in, maybe even 6 months in, but you've still got to actually finish the journey. You've still got to keep going for 4 to 6 months. And so you've kind of settled with your mindset of, yeah, I've succeeded. But you haven't yet because you got to get to the finish line still. But nothing's going to really stop you now. All of the worst is behind you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a difficult one.
In terms of your Chinese expedition, the documentary on National Geographic is fantastic, but you've got to write a book about the China experience.
I need to get a book out there, 100%. Yeah, and I will, because I kept the journal, I kept voice memos, and of course, you know, Mission Possible is about everything before the Yangtze.
Yes.
So the Yangtze needs to have its own book because there's too many stories along the Yangtze. There is just so much to talk about. And so, yeah, I will definitely get a book out on the Yangtze one day for sure.
So on to the future then. I mean, first of all, I'm obviously, because my background is business, I'm interested in the work you do in terms of corporate type speaking.
Yeah.
The resilience and the qualities and the skills and the strength which you've developed and implemented in all of your expeditions, Ash, it's not very hard for me to see how they can be applied to the business environment, to the personal environment. What do you try and put across when you're talking to businesses in terms of how your experiences can add value in terms of challenges they may face?
Yeah, and it's a good question because there's a lot of sort of corporate talks that have been coming in. You know, not just corporate, but TED Talks as well.
Yes.
You know, it's something that you can give a message across and people can take something from it. And with my talks, I'm always doing it in a relatable way. You know, it's never necessarily about me hacking the jungle or crossing the desert. You have to look at the bigger picture and you have to look at topics which can be relatable to the audience of what they can take from it and apply into their everyday life. And so there's messages on how to do things alone. Isolation, a crucial one for the past 2 years of the pandemic. Teamwork as well. Yeah. A lot of corporates love the teamwork, and especially when it comes to Madagascar and the first sort of few months of the Yangtze, I learned a lot on teamwork. You know, how we're kind of all individual beating hearts going about our way, but we all have the same goal, especially in business terms. You're always trying to get to a certain point. And what I found in Madagascar is whilst there was 4 of us, it was me, Max Lever, and photographer Suzanne. And whilst there was 4 of us there with our own sort of emotions, feelings, worries, doubts, we had to almost get all 4 of our individual hearts as one big power heart. We had to be fully in sync, whether that's tying off the raft and having full trust in each other that that's not going to break loose right above a crocodile. And so I learned so much about teamwork with that, and little messages that I put across on corporate talks. You can see them really relate and feel it and apply it to whatever it is that they're doing.
And from my perspective, that trust in the team is so fundamental to being successful in business or achieving your business goals.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's not so much that everyone's got to be best mates or really like each other, but you've got to have an underpinning platform of trust.
Yeah.
And I think if you haven't got that with people you work with, if that's within a team, if it's within a board of directors, if there isn't even that underpinning platform of trust, that's when they need to bring you in terms of addressing that.
Yeah.
And I think businesses also need to be open to the fact that having people with different experiences, perhaps more experiences carrying greater jeopardy, can totally be applied to the business sphere and can help build that platform.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Expedition-wise, what's next there, or can you tell me?
Yeah, it's just the beginning, I feel. You know, I think the whole business side. There's definitely the first sort of decade has been sort of adventures, definitely the business side as well, but now it's applying both on a heavy level. 20s are for grind and 30s for building the empire. And, we're getting started with some exciting things. I have got a project that we are going forward with in the next couple of months. I can't say much about that, but I can say that it is different. It is ambitious. It's a cool project to be working on, and it's a huge step, maybe the biggest step of my career. It's not a world first, but it's something super, super exciting.
Well, you've got us all in suspense. So is it a watch this space job, and you're going to let us all know on social media in due course?
Yeah, hopefully in the next month or two, I can start shouting about it because I can't wait.
Well, I could talk to you all day, my friend.
No,
thank you so much for coming. But
no, thank you.
Just one thing to finish with. You're a 3-time world record holder. You were voted Adventurer of the Year in 2015 and 2016. But the award I saw, which had me most interested, was you were once voted the 7th coolest Welsh person.
Yes.
And do you know what? I thought to myself, I think everything you've done is extremely cool. So I was trying to think, who are the 6 people who are cooler than you? And I could only get 3. I got Shakin' Stevens, the bloke from the Go Compare advert, and Fireman Sam. So there. Other than them, I just can't see where they get the other 3 from. Do you know who the other 3 were?
Oh, I do not know who. No, but I know Sir Tom Jones should have been number 1, shouldn't he?
He's got to be, hasn't he?
He was number 50. I was like, who's doing this?
Did you outdo Sir Tom?
What's that?
Did you outdo Sir Tom?
No, I can't believe it. But I think he should have outdone Sir Tom, but...
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I came 7, he came 50.
Yeah, I don't know you did. Yeah. We need to get him on the podcast as well.
I think Gareth Bale was number 9 as well on 10 or something.
Was he?
Yeah. So I don't know who was doing that. But
I've actually got the list right here.
Oh, wow.
Gareth Bale's number 10.
10?
Don't know who that is.
Lee Harpenny's a rugby player.
Yeah.
Fucking hell,
Luke Evans.
You know Luke Evans, he was Gaston from...
oh, yeah.
There he is.
Lord of the Rings. No, it wasn't Lord of the Rings, was it?
Beauty and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast,
He was also
that's
in
it.
Fast and Furious, wasn't he?
That's it.
Keep going, Jacob.
Here's Ash.
Right, so who's
He's
cooler
number
than
7.
Ash Dykes?
Oh, Gruff Rhys. Oh, yeah, I like him. He's lead singer of Super Fairy Animals. Craig Roberts, I don't know, to be honest. Chris Coleman. We know he did a great job with Wales. Geraint Thomas, yep. Rod Gilbert,
Who's
the
number
comedian.
one? Come on.
Number 1.
Fair play.
Drum roll. Almost. Oh, there we go.
Dan Bigger.
Oh, and little Glenn or Gwen from Gavin and Stacey's not in there.
He's not actor, he's an actor.
Yeah, but he's Welsh, isn't he?
No,
Is he not?
it's Rob Brydon. Oh, Ash, thank you so much for coming on. It's just been such a pleasure talking to you.
No, likewise.
Congratulations for all your achievements to date. I would just end by saying, check that book out, guys. Everyone's got loads of vouchers lying around after Christmas and presents to buy before it. I'm really loving it. And check out the documentary as well. So best of luck with everything you're doing. And thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
That was awesome, mate.
Awesome.
It really was. I really love that.